is Abraham's shrine. And this is what the prophet then says in the various surahs of the Quran where he refers to this, particularly Surah 2, the longest surah of the Quran, where many of these things are set forth, the Surah of the Cow, where he will talk about Abraham and how he erected the Kaaba and so on and so forth. Basically, we already have it here from that the rabbis are claiming, whether it's an accurate story or not, that Abraham set down this shrine. Is that in any Jewish scripture? No, none that I know of. And it's not in rabbinic literature. These are Muslim stories about the Kaaba. And do I think there's some truth to this? Oh, yeah, I think probably these refugees down in these areas did circulate stories like that. But at this time, was the Kaaba a monotheistic shrine? No, it was considered a pagan shrine. There were other deities in the Kaaba. And the moon deity, Manat, Aruza, and Alat, I think they're called, and there's some references to them in this. We're supposed to have a history book associated with this class. Did that ever come in? The Hittite book? I think it was, or rather the Bernard Lewis book, The Arabs and History. Is that in there? Well, he should have a first chapter or two on this subject. You should read that in conjunction with what we are reading. How many got that Lewis book? Yeah, do you have it with you, anybody? Can you give me the names of the chapters there? Do you have it? Do you have it? Give me the name of the first two chapters in that book. And if you can't get it at the bookstore, because they only have a limited number, you can get it from Amazon.com online, just as cheap or cheaper. Yeah, this is called The Arabs and History. It's a good little short thing. It's nothing fantastic, but it's quick. Here, he's doing what we're doing. Arabia before Islam. That's the first chapter, and that's what we're doing here. You can follow along. Second, Muhammad and the rise of Islam. That's what we're getting into now. So basically, you should read those two chapters for another view of this, and I'm sure that he'll tell you something about these things. Thanks a lot. This is the book in your version. I'm sure there are lots of different versions. Who published that? Does it say on the back of it? Oxford. Oxford. Yeah, well, there's many different versions of it, and they're all... Huh?
Oxford University.
Yeah. There are many different, and they'll be online, and if you can't get it in the bookstore, only could order about 20 some odd copies. That's all that were left. And I said, order them. I don't know if they're sold out down there or not, but in any case, it's called, it should be on your handout, your reading list, Bernard Lewis. You see him on television at the moment. He's an old man. He teaches at Princeton. He's in sort of Americans, and they're always having him as an expert on the Middle East nowadays, talking about the situation in Iraq, and they have him on these pundit shows like O'Reilly or Charlie Rose. Charlie Rose loves him. He always has him on there to hold forth about the situation in the Middle East. And it's what's called The Arabs in History?
Mm-hmm.
Huh? Yeah, The Arabs in History. And it doesn't matter who the publisher is. Or any similar one would be fine. There's a book by Philip Hitti, Short History of the Arabs. That's good too. Any history book would be fine that covers subjects of this kind. I can't really make two different of them. Okay. So they say our father Abraham made this shrine. Now there's nothing in the Old Testament about that, but is there stories about Abraham and Ishmael that have to do with interesting events that could be connected up to events such as this in the book of Genesis? How many have read the book of Genesis and can tell us? The book of Genesis is the first book of the Bible. I recommend you read it sometime. It's really interesting. Well, what happens is in the Bible stories, I had a few my Muslim friends in the class in the old days, and they went on to take an Old Testament class, and one friend of mine particularly he came from Jeddah, and he was really a very sweet fellow, and he didn't like the Old Testament stories. He kept saying, "Lies, these are lies, these are lies." I understand where he was coming from. The reason he thought they were all lies, first of all, Muhammad in the Quran says that Jews and Christians lie and have introduced lots of lying into their scripture. So that is also something that is a familiar thing even in the Quran. But he didn't like the nasty stories that were in the Old Testament. These people are not portrayed as saints in the Old Testament. They're portrayed as human people with lots of warts and failings and human weaknesses. And that upset him because his version and view of these people was all very exalted. So for instance, in the story about Abraham, Sarah, Hagar, and Ishmael, where Ishmael is the firstborn through Hagar, the so-called slave or concubine woman. Hagar is an Egyptian. And in the story, which is very different sources for the story in the Genesis presentation, Abraham, Sarah is barren and can't bear. And most of the women in the Genesis are not able to bear children until an angel comes and helps them. And that's really, I think, a symbolic thing to show that God's choice is in the final decision to open up the wombs of these women to give birth to these wonderful people. But in any case, the storyteller has to portray them, therefore, as having a hard time and not being able to conceive right away. Sarah is portrayed like that, and later on, so is Rachel, Jacob's favorite wife. She can't bear children, so meanwhile her sister's getting all the children, and then she gets jealous and slips some handmaids into Isaac's bed and so on and so forth, and they start bearing and so on. Well, my friend from Jeddah, he thought these stories were terrible. They were just, for him, totally disreputable and disgusting stories about the patriarchs. And that is true, they would seem that way to someone who didn't like the humanity of these stories and the colorfulness of these stories. So